Everyone forgets that Mortal Kombat was the first successful adaptation of a video game to a movie.
There were so many fans. It's as if we gave them the Mortal Kombat church. All the monks came out of hiding.
Think you know everything about Mortal Kombat? Think again. Behind the flying kicks, spine-ripping fatalities, and that unforgettable theme song lies a treasure chest of secrets the cast has been keeping for decades. From almost cast legends to bizarre on-set mishaps, there's more mystery here than in Shang Tsung's Soul collection. Strap in, because what the actors have revealed over the years will blow your fan knowledge wide open, and maybe even earn you a flawless victory. Fatalities behind the camera, secrets from the set. When fans watch Mortal Kombat, it feels larger than life. Flashy martial arts, bone-crunching sound effects, and a pace that barely gives you a moment to breathe. But behind the camera, things weren't always so polished. In fact, the set itself was just as chaotic and unpredictable as the outworld arenas the characters fought in. What looks like flawless choreography on screen often came with bruises, busted costumes, and the occasional "oops, that wasn't in the script" moment. One of the biggest surprises to casual viewers is how much of the action wasn't handled by stunt doubles. Many of the actors, some with strong martial arts backgrounds, some with virtually none, were thrown headfirst into wild fight scenes that had to look convincing. That meant hours of rehearsal, long days under hot lights, and sometimes, yes, real pain. Robin Shou, who played Liu Kang, has joked in interviews that half his memories of filming were either training or icing something he accidentally injured. It wasn't uncommon for a simple scene to require multiple takes because someone either slipped, mistimed a kick, or nearly knocked their co-star into the camera equipment. Then there were the costumes. What looked fierce on screen could feel like a punishment in reality. Scorpion's mask? Imagine trying to breathe through a plastic grill while throwing high kicks. Sub-Zero's outfit? Layers of material that turned fight choreography into a sweaty endurance test. And let's not even get started on Goro, the hulking four-armed beast who was brought to life through animatronics and puppetry. The cast had to interact with this clunky, unpredictable giant, which often malfunctioned mid-scene. Imagine trying to sell the idea of an all-powerful warrior while a rubber arm droops off to the side like a broken toy. Not all behind-the-scenes secrets were about pain, though. Some were just plain hilarious. Take Bridget Wilson, who played Sonya Blade. She famously had very little time to prepare for the role. She jumped in with almost no martial arts training and was expected to keep up with actors who had been doing martial arts for years. Instead of panicking, she embraced the chaos. There are stories of her practicing kicks between takes, running lines while still trying to figure out how not to sprain an ankle in the process. And somehow, that raw energy translated perfectly into Sonya's on-screen fierceness. Of course, when things went wrong, the crew didn't always hit cut. Some of those mistakes made their way into the final film, either because they looked too good to waste or because there was no time or budget to reshoot. That means a handful of what fans consider polished fight sequences actually include little slip-ups that the cast and crew knew about, but audiences were too dazzled to notice. In a way, that's the spirit of Mortal Kombat. Messy, chaotic, but somehow still awesome. And then there were the Easter eggs, the little on-set jokes or sneaky details the crew slipped in. From background props to quick movements that paid homage to the video games, some scenes were practically a wink to fans who were paying close attention. These weren't always planned in advance. Sometimes the cast would improvise, tossing in a gesture or a line delivery that felt right in the moment. Decades later, fans are still discovering them. The physical toll wasn't the only challenge. Shooting on location meant dealing with unpredictable weather, lighting struggles, and the occasional bug invasion, because nothing screams Hollywood glamour like swatting mosquitoes between takes. Still, the cast powered through, partly because they were young, hungry actors ready to prove themselves, and partly because they knew they were making something that felt unlike anything else at the time. Perhaps that's what makes the behind-the-scenes stories so fascinating. Mortal Kombat wasn't a slick billion-dollar franchise when it started. It was scrappy, experimental, and in many ways, risky. The cast didn't have the luxury of CGI to fix everything. What you saw on screen was often the result of pure grit, a lot of sweat, and maybe a few muttered curses under the actor's breath. The fact that it came together so seamlessly is nothing short of its own kind of movie magic. Next time you watch Liu Kang unleash his bicycle kick or Sonya slam an enemy into submission, remember, behind those flawless moves were hours of imperfect rehearsals, wardrobe struggles, and moments of comedy that never made it to the big screen. In a way, the real battle wasn't against Shang Tsung or Sub-Zero. It was against sore muscles, malfunctioning props, and the sheer madness of trying to bring a video game to life in the mid-90s. But what if the fighters we saw on screen weren't always the first picks, and the casting almost looked very different? Yup, there's a side like that. Casting secrets and almost choices. When you look back at the Mortal Kombat movie today, it feels impossible to imagine anyone else in those iconic roles. Robin Shou is Liu Kang. Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa is Shang Tsung. Christopher Lambert is Raiden, even with his mysterious lightning eyes and oddly whimsical laugh. But here's the thing, the movie you know and love was nearly an entirely different beast. Hollywood had a knack for almost casting some very unexpected names. And if things had gone slightly differently, Mortal Kombat could have looked like a totally alternate universe crossover. Let's start with one of the wildest almost casts, Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's right, the Muscles from Brussels himself was originally courted to play Johnny Cage. On paper, it makes perfect sense. Cage was modeled after him in the video game, a flashy martial artist, cocky attitude, Hollywood ego the size of Outworld. But Van Damme turned it down. Why? Because he decided to make his own fighting game movie instead, Street Fighter. History might call that a fatality in decision-making, but hey, it gave us a world where Johnny Cage was free to become his own legend. Then there's Raiden. Many fans still scratch their heads about the decision to cast Christopher Lambert, famous for Highlander, as the Thunder God. His French accent wasn't exactly ancient Asian deity material, but Lambert brought something quirky and mischievous to the role that stuck with fans. What most people don't know is that Lambert wasn't just parachuting in for a paycheck. He was deeply enthusiastic about the project and even covered some travel expenses out of his own pocket so he could film on location with the cast. Imagine another actor, say Sean Connery, who was also reportedly on the radar playing Raiden. Would he have warned us about impending doom with the same giddy sparkle in his eye? Hard to picture. Bridget Wilson's story as Sonya Blade is another piece of casting trivia gold. She wasn't the first choice for the role. In fact, Cameron Diaz was originally cast. Yes, that Cameron Diaz. But before filming began, Diaz broke her wrist in training, forcing her to step away. Enter Wilson, who was fresh off her role in Billy Madison. With only days to prepare, she stepped in, learned her fight scenes on the fly, and basically became Sonya by sheer willpower. Looking back, her grit and rawness ended up working perfectly for the character. Sonya was supposed to be tough, stubborn, and a little rough around the edges. Wilson wasn't acting toughness, she was living it. And then there's Liu Kang. For many fans, Robin Shou was a revelation, a charismatic martial artist who grounded the film with real emotional weight. But he wasn't the studio's first pick either. Before Shou landed the role, producers had eyed several Asian American actors, including Jason Scott Lee, Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. Shou himself admitted he thought the audition was a long shot, and he was shocked when he got the call. Little did he know he'd end up becoming the face of Mortal Kombat on the big screen, reprising the role in sequels and earning lifelong fandom in the process. Even supporting roles had surprising casting twists. Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa wasn't the original choice for Shang Tsung, but thank the Elder Gods, he got the part. His performance was so iconic, so dripping with villainous glee, that he later reprised the role in the Mortal Kombat 11 video game more than 20 years later. Few actors in any franchise can say they've owned a role across multiple decades. It's the kind of performance that makes you wonder, if someone else had played Shang Tsung, would we even remember the movie the same way? And here's a fun tidbit. Some of the actors actually doubled up. With a tight budget and plenty of masked characters, a few performers pulled double duty, portraying more than one role. This was particularly true for ninjas like Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Reptile. The audience saw them as distinct fighters, but under the costumes, it was sometimes the same stunt performer switching outfits between scenes. Talk about multitasking. All of these casting near misses and last-minute swaps add up to one thing. The Mortal Kombat we got wasn't just lucky, it was lightning in a bottle. If Van Damme had said yes, Johnny Cage would have been a different character entirely. If Cameron Diaz hadn't gotten injured, Sonya might have had a smoother fighting style, but less raw edge. If Raiden had been played by someone else, he might have been dead serious, instead of cheekily grinning between thunderbolts. The end result is a reminder that sometimes the almosts are just as fun to imagine as the final product. The cast we ended up with wasn't just a group of actors filling roles, they became icons. They embodied the weird, campy, over-the-top energy of Mortal Kombat in a way that no alternate casting could have captured. And maybe that's why the film still resonates today, not because it was perfect, but because it felt perfectly right. Hidden combos hardcore fans missed. If Mortal Kombat taught us anything, it's that there's always another secret move waiting to be discovered. The same goes for the movie. Beyond the flashy kicks and larger-than-life villains, the film hid plenty of details and nods that slipped past even the most eagle-eyed fans. It's like the cinematic equivalent of pulling off a 10-button combo you didn't know existed. Blink and you'd miss it. One of the best-kept trivia gems is how much of the fight choreography borrowed directly from the games themselves. Remember Liu Kang's famous bicycle kick? It wasn't just a random cinematic flourish, it was a direct lift from the game, recreated shot for shot. But here's the kicker. Robin Shou admitted he hated filming it. Why? Because he had to dangle from a wire, furiously pedaling his legs in midair while trying not to look ridiculous. The scene lasts only seconds on screen, but it took hours of reshoots and adjustments. By the end, Shou confessed his abs were so sore he could barely stand upright. Fans loved it though, so call it a flawless victory for authenticity. Then there's Scorpion's "Get over here" line, a phrase that has lived rent-free in every gamer's head since the arcade days. In the movie, the voice for that line wasn't Scorpion's actor at all. It was dubbed over using the original recording from Ed Boon, co-creator of the video game. That means when you hear Scorpion bark his signature catchphrase in the film, it's literally the same voice that haunted arcades in the early 90s. Talk about fan service on another level. And how about Goro? To casual viewers, he was just the four-armed monster looming over everyone else. But the reality of bringing him to life was one of the most complicated practical effects of the era. Goro wasn't CGI, he was a full animatronic puppet controlled by a team of puppeteers. His head, arms, and even facial expressions had to be coordinated like a small symphony of machinery and humans. The contraption was so heavy and so unpredictable that entire days of filming were derailed whenever Goro broke down. At one point, one of his arms simply fell off mid-take. Instead of panicking, the cast erupted into laughter, joking that maybe Johnny Cage had taken him out off-screen. Speaking of Cage, here's a blink-and-you-miss-it detail. In one scene, he casually signs an autograph on a photo of himself. That photo, it wasn't a prop whipped up by the art department. It was actually a real promo shot of Lyndon Ashby, the actor playing Cage. In other words, the movie doubled down on blurring the line between Ashby and his egotistical on-screen persona. It's the kind of meta-joke that makes re-watching the film all the more rewarding. Sound design also carried more secrets than most fans realized. Every time a character landed a punch or kick, the sound effects weren't pulled from a generic Hollywood library. Many of them were created by the crew, smashing and twisting bizarre objects, like hitting slabs of meat, breaking vegetables, and even snapping celery stalks. That crunchy, bone-breaking sound? Probably a poor carrot sacrificed in the name of martial arts cinema. And let's not forget the dialogue quirks. Shang Tsung's chilling, "Your soul is mine," became one of the most quoted lines in the franchise, but Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa revealed he improvised some of his delivery. He leaned into the role so hard that even when the camera wasn't rolling, he'd stalk around the set, speaking in Shang Tsung's sinister cadence just to freak out his co-stars. To this day, fans still debate whether his villainous charisma carried the film more than the heroes did. There are also smaller Easter eggs planted for sharp-eyed fans. In the background of certain temple scenes, you can spot set designs inspired by the original arcade stages, subtle nods to the living forest and pit arenas. They weren't carbon copies, but the design team snuck in just enough to make hardcore gamers smile. The filmmakers knew their audience wasn't just casual moviegoers, it was the die-hard arcade kids who had spent hours memorizing those pixelated backdrops. Perhaps the funniest bit of trivia is the hidden bloopers that made it into the final cut. In one scene, Sonya delivers a fierce kick that sends her opponent tumbling. What audiences didn't realize is that the actor took the hit so hard, he accidentally rolled out of frame in the wrong direction. Instead of refilming it, the director kept it. It looked too natural and too intense to throw away. Fans thought it was perfectly choreographed. The cast knew it was a glorious accident. All of this adds up to one truth. Mortal Kombat wasn't just a film adaptation of a game. It was a playful collaboration between cast, crew, and source material. Every Easter egg, every improvised line, every crunchy sound effect was part of an effort to make something fans would obsess over for decades. And obsess we did. While most viewers saw a straightforward martial arts fantasy, those who look closer realize the film is layered with sly winks and hidden gems. It's almost like the movie itself is testing you. Can you spot the secret combo? Or are you just button-mashing your way through? Now, let's see if the movie had a flawless victory. The audience and critics react. When Mortal Kombat hit theaters in 1995, audiences didn't exactly know what to expect. At the time, video game movies had a shaky reputation, and honestly, that hasn't completely changed. Critics were sharpening their blades, ready to deliver brutalities in print. But fans were ready to shout, "Finish him!" The second the opening theme blasted through the speakers, what unfolded was a rare case where the critics grimaced, but the people in the seats couldn't get enough. Let's start with the critics. Many reviews at the time were, well, less than kind. They called the plot thin, the dialogue campy, and the acting uneven. Some couldn't take the over-the-top fight sequences seriously, and others rolled their eyes at the idea of a video game having a movie at all. To them, Mortal Kombat was little more than a flashy gimmick, a string of fights glued together by a story thinner than Scorpion's mask straps. If Rotten Tomatoes had been around in the mid-90s, the critical score might have looked like a mercy kill. But while critics were handing out low blows, audiences were cheering. On opening weekend, the movie pulled in more than anyone expected, topping the box office and holding its ground for weeks. For gamers who had grown up pumping quarters into the arcade machines, seeing Liu Kang, Raiden, Sonya, and Scorpion on the big screen was surreal. The film didn't need to win Oscars, it needed to deliver excitement, martial arts, and that thunderous techno anthem. And it did all of that in spades. The cast felt the love almost instantly. At conventions, they were mobbed by fans quoting their lines, asking for autographs, and debating which fight scene was the best. Robin Shou recalled being shocked at how many people approached him on the street, recognizing him as Liu Kang even years later. Bridget Wilson admitted that fans would often ask her to reenact Sonya's finishing moves at meet and greets. For Christopher Lambert, whose mischievous laugh as Raiden became an accidental meme before memes even existed, the audience response was validation that his quirky take had worked. And then there's Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa. Fans practically worshipped his portrayal of Shang Tsung. Critics might have complained that the villains were cartoonish, but audiences ate it up. Tagawa's delivery of "Your soul is mine" echoed across schoolyards and arcades, cementing his place as one of the most memorable villains in video game movie history. Fans loved him so much that decades later, the Mortal Kombat 11 video game brought him back to voice and embody Shang Tsung all over again. You don't get that kind of career resurrection unless audiences really, truly adored you. The movie also sparked endless fan theories. Some insisted the film hinted at characters who never actually appeared on screen. Others debated continuity. Was this version of Liu Kang the same as in the games, or a different timeline altogether? At fan conventions, cast members were often asked to weigh in, and more often than not, they'd laugh and say, "We're just as confused as you are." The ambiguity didn't bother audiences, though. It fueled more passion, more debate, more midnight rewatches. What's really interesting is how the movie grew in reputation over time. While critics initially dismissed it, fans elevated it into cult classic status. Even today, you'll find people who argue passionately that it's still the best video game movie ever made. Sure, newer adaptations may have bigger budgets and slicker CGI, but few have captured the scrappy, campy charm of the 1995 original. The movie's flaws became part of its charm, like a clunky but beloved arcade joystick that still works after years of button mashing. The soundtrack deserves its own standing ovation here too. That techno theme, simply titled Techno Syndrome, was blasted at sports arenas, nightclubs, and anywhere people wanted an adrenaline rush. Fans didn't just love it, they worshipped it. The song gave the film a pulse that carried straight into audience hearts. If you've ever shouted "Mortal Kombat" at full volume when the beat drops, you already know why fans responded the way they did. It wasn't just a soundtrack, it was a rallying cry. Ultimately, the film pulled off something critics didn't predict. It became a shared cultural moment. People lined up to watch it multiple times, bought the VHS as soon as it dropped, and showed it off at sleepovers like it was forbidden treasure. Parents groaned, teachers rolled their eyes, but kids and teens couldn't get enough. For many, Mortal Kombat wasn't just a movie, it was an event. Yes, the critics may have delivered a harsh fatality back in the 90s, but the audience delivered the only verdict that mattered. Mortal Kombat was a flawless victory in their eyes, and decades later, that roar of approval hasn't faded. If anything, it's only grown louder. From brutality to cult classic. When Mortal Kombat first landed, critics sharpened their pens like scorpions' kunai. Reviews in the mid-90s were brutal, dismissing it as all fight, no substance. Some even claimed the movie was nothing more than a glorified music video stitched together with martial arts moves. One review famously scoffed that audiences would forget it within a year, a prediction that has aged about as well as milk in the outworld sun. But here's the plot twist. Fans didn't just ignore the critics, they doubled down. While newspapers were handing out 2-star ratings, audiences were lining up for repeat viewings. The disconnect created a fascinating split. On one side, critics grumbling about shallow storytelling. On the other, fans quoting "Your soul is mine" like gospel. That tension between critical failure and fan favorite became part of the movie's DNA. Over the years, something unexpected happened. Critics softened. As the dust settled and nostalgia kicked in, film writers began to revisit Mortal Kombat not as failed cinema, but as a product of its time. A scrappy, campy, gloriously over-the-top adaptation that captured the essence of the game. In fact, Modern critics often rank it as one of the best video game movies, not because it's flawless, but because it leaned so hard into being fun. The feedback loop didn't just stop at reviews. Fans kept the movie alive through conventions, cosplay, and online forums. Their enthusiasm eventually pressured the industry to rethink video game adaptations, paving the way for reboots, sequels, and the eventual redemption arc for the franchise. Ironically, the very things critics mocked, its camp, its cheesiness, its overblown fights, are what fans now celebrate most. In hindsight, the critics were wrong. Mortal Kombat didn't fade into obscurity. It transformed into a cult classic. And in the ultimate twist of fate, some of those once harsh reviewers have circled back, admitting that maybe, just maybe, they underestimated a movie that refused to die. Now, what happens when a campy 90s video game film refuses to fade away? That's where the legacy begins. Combat through time. It's been nearly 3 decades since the original Mortal Kombat movie landed in theaters. And yet, like a fighter who refuses to stay down, its legacy keeps coming back for round after round. Ask any fan of the franchise about the 1995 film, and their eyes will light up, not because it was flawless cinema, but because it was their cinema. The movie wasn't just an adaptation. It became a cultural checkpoint, one that shaped how video games and films collided for years to come. One of the biggest reasons it still matters is simple. It proved that video game movies could succeed. Before Mortal Kombat, the track record wasn't exactly inspiring. Super Mario Brothers, anyone? Hollywood had struggled to translate joystick thrills into cinematic experiences without losing the magic. But Mortal Kombat flipped the script. It delivered faithful character portrayals, jaw-dropping fights, and an unapologetic embrace of its over-the-top source material. Fans felt seen. Studios saw dollar signs. Suddenly, adapting games for the big screen didn't look like a risky gamble. It looked like an opportunity. The cast, too, became part of this legacy. Robin Shou's Liu Kang set a standard for martial arts heroes in Western films, graceful, determined, and anchored by heart. Bridget Wilson's Sonya Blade inspired countless young fans, proving that toughness wasn't just reserved for the guys. Hiroyuki Tagawa's Shang Tsung, he cemented himself as the ultimate movie villain. So much so that fans demanded his return decades later. Even Christopher Lambert's quirky Raiden lives on in memes, GIFs, and affectionate fan debates. These performances didn't just entertain, they carved out permanent spots in pop culture. And then there's the music. The pounding techno anthem, Techno Syndrome, didn't just become a hit. It became the soundtrack of an entire generation's adrenaline. Sports stadiums blasted it. Dance clubs remixed it. Fans used it as their personal hype track before exams, workouts, or weekend marathons of the game. To this day, you only need to hear that opening shout of Mortal Kombat, and suddenly, you're ready to uppercut someone into the next dimension. Few soundtracks have achieved that kind of immortality. The legacy also extends to censorship and cultural debates. The Mortal Kombat games were infamous for their graphic violence, sparking congressional hearings and parental outrage in the early 90s. The movie, by comparison, had to tone things down, but it still carried the reputation of being dangerous or too intense for kids. Parents wagged their fingers while kids begged for tickets anyway. In hindsight, the controversy only added to the allure. Watching Mortal Kombat felt rebellious, like you were getting away with something. That rebellious streak stuck with fans, giving the movie a badge of honor in pop culture history. And let's not ignore the fan loyalty. The movie has survived multiple reboots, sequels, and reinterpretations. Fans still gather at conventions to meet the original cast, still quote the dialogue, and still argue over which fight was the best. The film has aged in the way cult classics often do. Some parts feel dated, but those very flaws have become endearing. Instead of being forgotten, the movie has been embraced as a time capsule of 90s camp mixed with martial arts glory. Even Hollywood seems to acknowledge the lasting impact. When the 2021 reboot arrived, it had slicker effects, and more brutal fatalities, but fans inevitably compared it back to the 1995 version. And many admitted the old-school charm of the original still held its ground. That's legacy, when a nearly 30-year-old movie refuses to be overshadowed by shinier newcomers. Most importantly, Mortal Kombat matters because of what it represents to its audience. For many, it was the first time they saw a video game world come alive on screen. For others, it was their introduction to martial arts cinema. And for countless kids of the 90s, it was simply the coolest thing ever. Nostalgia keeps it alive, but so does the fact that it genuinely delivered on its promise. It was fun, it was bold, and it made you want to shout, "Finish him!" at random intervals in daily life. So why does it still matter? Because it never stopped being talked about. Because it captured lightning in a bottle with its cast, its soundtrack, and its unapologetic embrace of camp. And because every time a new generation stumbles onto that movie, whether on streaming or dusty VHS, they get it. They laugh, they cheer, and they feel the same rush audiences did back in 1995. That's not just legacy, that's immortality. Mortal Kombat's secrets prove the fight is never really over. Stay tuned for more hidden stories and hit that subscribe button and join the next round.